What's up there, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, the place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. I am your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media of course, on Twitter at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's, Twitter page at VictoryPod1. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio, hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox, on Mondays at 6 p.m. And so there's quite a bit to of course, to talk about. So of course, this past weekend, big homecoming weekend. Of course, shout out to Howard University for having their homecoming. Made a little cameo appearance over there. For a little bit. Like I said, great atmosphere, great environment. Congratulations. Happy homecoming weekend to those, who celebrate. And right after that same day, I went for this walk for this cause that I've been supporting called Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. It is a walk called Light the Night. So it's regards to raising awareness for cancer and charity, stuff like that. So the cause is very near and dear. So I was definitely grateful to be a part of that. So outside that, pretty much the news I want to talk about. It's quite a bit. Of course, I'm going to give my predictions for Saturday night's main event. Give my take about the World Series. Game 5 is literally on right now. I don't want to be long-winded about it. Even though this past, this past Monday was the longest running series ever. Longest running game, I think, in MLB history. 18 innings. Did not stay up all, for the entire game. But I know my parents did. But I was like, look, 9, good enough for me. And I just went to bed right after that. But like I said, I'm going to talk about that. So of course, recently the NBA has had, it was quite a huge start. Got off to a flaming high start. So as far as Snyder just hit a solo home run immediately. It's nasty work. So as far as that, like I say, when it comes back to the NBA thing, of course, Victor Wembanyama, Wemby, aka the Alien, looking like a world beater. Look like he could very well be, your face of the NBA because of the way that he put Anthony Davis in the blender, in that game last week against the Mavericks. So like that training with Olajuwon and Garnett has clearly been paying dividends. Of course, thus far. So I wouldn't be surprised if this dude was MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. He definitely has it in him. 40, 15, going up like 71% from the floor, 88% from the free throw line, I believe. So like, man, Dodgers got to wake up. They got to wake up. Like I said, watching in real time. But like I said, as far as that, and the thing is, the thing about it is that just as just as the season, it's like I said, getting off to a hot start, getting off to a great start, and things like that. Like they had breakout games for Giannis and many others around the league. Unfortunately, there's a giant cloud. That will overshadow that, being this gambling controversy. And so the first names that got hemmed up were Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier. And the thing is, it was Chauncey Billups. They say he had like this X-ray, this poker table that they had like this X-ray thing you could see right through it, whatever the case is, something crazy. It's like I said, as far as that, he got hemmed up with that. Rozier, there's a picture of him getting taken out in handcuffs. And of course, they say Gilbert's definitely snitching and singing like God Rain as far as that's concerned. Kevin Garnett's name, another one that said he was caught up in, his name was added to some poker game from like 2019, and I'm thinking like, these dudes making as much money. I'm like, come on, when is enough? And it leaves this cloud over an otherwise great start to the season, especially with with the return of the NBA on NBC. You know what I mean? And several of these games have been looking like absolute cinema. I've been looking forward to the NBC games more than the ESPN games. You know what I mean? Even though the NBA and TNT went to the ESPN side, but the NBC ones, those are the ones that feel like those are can't miss. Games, must see games. And so, and the thing is, for this to happen, it's just cloud of controversy, the distraction, what have you. This is unnecessary, and so of course, I want to say that the Bucks end up getting the win, and last night, and of course, Giannis, he stepped his game up, especially after you had to change the shoes. You know what I mean? So the shoes that he switched look better anyway. But but like as far as that, so now I'm going to of course my NFL recap, and on Monday Night Football, Chiefs beat the Washington Commandos, or Commodores rather. It's like their season may be a wrap. So yes, like I said, I'm going to talk about those things, and then right after this, for those who follow the program, follow the podcast, I'm going going to wrestling. So make sure to stay tuned. More of that on the horizon. As you can see, for those that are watching, I have this Asuka shirt. Give Asuka Appreciation. You know what I mean? Like, giving her just due. And like I said, I'm going to get into that in a minute. So the recap of Week 8. The Chargers dismantle the Vikings, strike lightning down on the Vikings, 37-10 on Thursday Night Football. Then, for Sunday, you had the Dolphins blow out the Falcons, 34-10. Of course, the Ravens beat the Bears, 30-16. The Jets defeat the Bengals in a close one, 39-38. Aaron Glenn finally got his first win as a Jets head coach this season. The Bills just stomp all over the Panthers, 40-9. Of course, Josh Allen once again continued to prove that he was not a fluke MVP. The Texans defeat the 49ers 26-15. The Patriots defeat the Browns 32-13. The Eagles defeat the Giants 38-20. The refs definitely, they definitely did the big one in that game. Another story. The Bucks destroy the Saints 23-3. Who that? Anyway, the Colts defeat the Titans 38-14. Prime time. Denver Broncos stampede all over the Cowboys, 44-24. Made Bo Nix look like John Elway in that game. Secondary suspect. Heads are going to end up rolling, but that's another story. The Packers defeat the Steelers 35-25. Great to see. Of course, Aaron Rodgers get humbled by his old team. Especially with Jordan Love. And on Monday Night Football, like I said, the Chiefs destroyed the Commodores 28-7. So that is your NFL recap. And so now I'm going to go into, as I like to do best, when it comes to wrestling. And by the way, for those that are watching by way of Twitter or X, quote unquote, thank you very much for watching. And for those who want to watch on YouTube, youtube.com/@VonRestVirginia, please make sure to like and subscribe for more content. So with that being said, I'm going to give a brief recap of SmackDown, but I will say that, or rather the highlight of SmackDown, of course, was Jade Cargill's, Jade Cargill's a heel turn. So that right there said everything. So like someone get into that in a minute. But as far as like I said, as far as like the key segments, the takeaways from this, Drew McIntyre defeated Jimmy Uso in a no DQ match, and we see that Drew got into it with Naomi online on Twitter. I thought that was hilarious. You know what I mean? Of course, like online Twitter beef between two of the biggest haters in WWE. Why not? They're pretty much two halves of the same coin anyway. They're two of the most diabolical haters, like seen in the company, even more so than Roman himself. But but Roman doesn't engage in that type of online pettiness like that. So, but when it comes to them, they would take it there. So they certainly did. And so like I said, of course, like I said, we saw, like I said, Drew defeated Jimmy. We know that Jimmy's got got a baby on board, so you got to proceed with caution with that. So after his win, Drew McIntyre attacked Jimmy Uso and assaulted WWE champion Cody Rhodes for the United States. And then, of course, when it comes to the U.S. Championship, Ilya Dragunov retained this championship against Aleister Black with assistance from Damian Priest. That feud goes on and on. So for the tag match, we have a tag team match. MFT, Tama Tonga, and JC Shizay Mateo defeat Rey Fenix and Shinsuke Nakamura. And of course, when it comes to the tag match, Tiffany Stratton and Stephanie Bonner defeat Julia and Kiana James. And so after that match, Jade Cargill, the storm arrives. They said the storm is coming. Well, guess what? The storm arrived on Tiffany Stratton because, Jade definitely tapped into her heel side, natural for her. And the way that she attacked Tiffany, and especially after that clothesline, and the way that Jade flipped her hair back, she looked like Scar. And especially like when you saw the close up of that scar over eyebrow, I was like, oh, it was like she transformed. It's like she transformed the Scar. And so, and of course, the memes going on online, side by side picture of her and Scar. I call her Jade Cargill. You know what I mean? So, hey, like I say, I mean, I feel like that definitely applies. And this is a much needed change in course. Like I say, pretty much when it comes to Jade's character, like her trajectory, if you will. I saw the meme about like Jade's cosplay. Of course, like when she won Queen of the Ring, she was dressed up like Storm. So it was side by side. On the top, there's side by side with her and Storm, right? Same outfit. Of course, I'm talking about all white outfit. And by the way, I just got finished drawing a picture of Storm. Of course, it's like yesterday, just recently. So yes, matter of fact, it was on Monday I finished, but that's another story. Like I said, it's a side by side with Storm, with Jade and Storm at the top, and on the bottom is a side by side with Jade and Scar. And like I said, with the look on Jade's face when she attacked Tiffany and had that Scar looking stare, look on her face, I said, yeah, this is what we're talking about. The name of this episode might be called Scargill, but so, I mean, it was just natural. I mean, she was just, I don't know, just really in her element. When that happened, because that, I feel like that loss at SummerSlam really took a lot of wind out of her sails, if you will. But I think this is the thing that's really the shot in the arm. That she really needs. I know there's certain people that I know of, that especially I ain't gonna call Black wrestling by name, but I've seen certain people that that won't mention Jade, won't mention her by name. But maybe tomorrow they may change their tune. Who knows? And so it's like I said, that was the highlight, of Friday, and of course, plus it was also a pretty funny segment. When Nia was coming from Charlotte and Alexa, and Charlotte, just put her in her place. But like I said, the thing is, like I said, the main thing, the highlight, like I said, was Jade's heel turn, and I'm looking to see that pay off on Saturday for Saturday night's main event. And speaking of that, I'm going to go into my recap of Monday Night Raw, and then and of course also with NXT, and then it's finally, excuse me, of course, eventually I'm going to want to, my predictions for Saturday night's main event, and also another thing I want to talk about, um, was this, let's see, as far as this news, rumors of Cena's last opponent, right, and you know, especially with matter of fact, I'm going to it right now. I know there are talks about who John Cena's final opponent may be. Um, there are rumors that it may be either Chris Jericho or Gunther. Triple H definitely shut down any possibility of Edge. You know, especially especially when the fans kept chanting "We want Edge" at Crown Jewel, and Triple H was like, well, keep wanting, pretty much like says, I'm like, keep wanting them, and that was his way of saying, that ain't gonna happen. But Jericho's contract with AEW expires very soon. They said like December, and so Cena's last match is in December, and so and like Cena, his name is heavily thrown in there, especially with with him possibly making a return for his own farewell run before going to the Hall of Fame. So when it comes to Jericho, the main thing that I want to see him as far as like I said, when it comes to any type of WWE return would be as long as he's just going into the Hall of Fame. As long as it ends with him retiring and finally going to the Hall of Fame and riding off into the sunset. You know what I mean? Especially considering when you look at somebody like Cena, of course he was definitely younger than him. Calling a career, having his farewell tour, and retiring before 50. AJ Styles is going to retire next year, before the age of 50. Brock Lesnar, he's like I say, this is the twilight of his career as well. You can definitely tell he's starting to wind things down. Randall, he, like I say, his time he has left is pretty much in the palm of your hand for real. You can count all 5 fingers on your hand in terms of how much time you really got left. Like I say, of course, as far as that's concerned. And the thing is, I don't want to go off on this tangent, but the thing is, I think with a lot of these guys now, when it comes to their retirement, I think wrestling retirements going to be much more different than they were before, because so many of them, much like Cena, have other outlets and interests, outside of this. You know what I mean? So this is not. They don't feel like it has to be the end all be all. You know what I mean? Like as far as that, like to the point where they have to keep getting to the ring all the way to the point where they pretty much have to crawl. So what I mean, like so the thing is, gone are the days where you were hanging on for too long, like Hogan, like Flair. You know what I mean? I even go recently Undertaker. What I mean, and as far as that's concerned, if it had not been for the only reason why Shawn Michaels came back the way he did was because was because that Saudi money. To be honest with you, even though now, these days he likes to consider, he doesn't consider that his retirement match. Pretty much for him, it's non-canon. Might as well say it's AI generated. So for him, his last official match was against Undertaker. We'll just leave it at that. So though that era is is done at that point. So with the way guys like Cena and others look at retirement is much different. And like Cena, they take it in a completely different angle. Cena may come back and make a cameo appearance here and there, whatever. But in terms of having that as a career, he's leaving that behind him, you know, and that's smart because because of the fact that I believe that that these guys that are going to retirement now are looking at the previous generations and saying to themselves like, nah, I'm not going to do that. They look at that as what not to do. You know, uh, I'm pretty sure like I said, that they've looked at your Flairs and your Hogans and said to themselves like, no, that's not how I'm going to go out. So if anything, I respect them for that. Because their thing is, you know what, I would much rather retire with all of my faculties. I would much rather, like I said, retire. I can still, function. Where I can still, still, walk and have stability, and still have, my mental, capacity. Like I say, like, pretty much, still have, yes, like I say, still have, still have my brain cells left and things like that. I can still have, like I said, still fully function and and enjoy a better quality life. You know, um, we've seen how Edge lost nearly 10 years of his career. You know, because like I said, like, because of that, the neck and because of that neck and spine injury. You know what I mean? And so like Cena, like Cena, when you look at Cena and others that are going to follow him, they're like, you know what? Nah, I'd much rather, like I say, if anything, I'd much rather preserve my body, um, you know, than to, go down that path. Um, I know CM Punk, you he's on his time is ticking also. You know what I mean? And so as far as that's concerned, um, I wouldn't be surprised, if Jericho were to be seen his last opponent. It would, even though on the flip side, it'd be great to see Gunther as seen his last opponent as well. You know what I mean? And especially since they never shared a ring together. Why not? You know. Um, so yeah, so like those are my thoughts when it comes to Cena's last opponent's farewell, and also um, I know just recently WWE released you know uh, a commercial for WrestleMania 42, where they're all sitting sitting at a blackjack table, roulette table. Uh, we have Triple H at the head, Paul Heyman. You have Roman Reigns, uh, Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Brock Lesnar. Um, so excuse me, I was pretty much so like those like I see those are the main names that they were all at that table, and um, you know this is I guess you can say pretty much like sort of like their encore, if you will. It's just like it's like it is what it is, whatever. Like I guess is hitting that Roman and becoming first 11th you know uh, main event, like sort of like a WrestleMania main event. This time he wins, so he wouldn't have to go on a WrestleMania losing streak. you know, uh, but I know that Roman's presence in the title scene is definitely missed, sorely missed. And so it's great to see him in that commercial. Now it would have been great to, it would have been great to see a women's version of that commercial. Oh, it had Bianca, Charlotte, Rhea, Io, um, say Asuka, Becky. You know what I mean? Pretty much. You know what I mean? But at the same time, when you look at this women's roster is sorely depleted, very much depleted. Bianca can't come back soon, can't come back fast enough. And that's all I gotta say. So now I'm going to go into Monday Night Raw. There's quite a bit to talk about with this one because especially when it comes to this opening segment. And I'll say that there it is. And the opening segment, pretty much, told everything. We had CM Punk and Jey Uso going face to face. Then we had Nikki Bella versus Roxanne Perez, the number one contenders match for a shot at the Intercontinental Championship. Penta versus Rusev, and you had the women's tag title match. Of course, you had Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair versus Bayley and Lyra Valkyria. And so here we have CM Punk and Jey Uso going face to face, especially since they're going to be facing each other at Saturday night's main event. And so we have Jey Uso kicking off Raw, and of course he quickly turns attention to a number of people, in his ear as of late, including Roman, his brother Jimmy, and his mom, among others. And Jay had a very interesting interview recently, where he definitely felt some type of way about how so many people are saying that he's just an entrance, and that's it. He's saying that he's more than just his entrance. But yet, this same guy who, constantly has them run his music back. As soon as his music finishes, he's like, run it back, run it back, run it back. For everybody to go, go yeet. What I mean? But it's just like, at this point, you're not making your perception any better. And in that same interview, Jay talked about how, he was Roman's equal. I'm like, on what planet? Unless Roman is, feeding him to say that. But the thing is, Roman never had to rely on his entrance. Roman has natural aura. Roman has a certain charisma, certain swagger, certain aura. It's just something about him, an X factor that not many or anybody on today's roster can touch. Roman is the defining star of his era. I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Roman is a once in a generation, especially when it comes to, what he has done as the tribal chief, where he, officially took control of his narrative, took control of his career, invested in himself, and it worked. It paid major dividends. Now, Jey Uso was a critical part of this bloodline, storyline, from the very beginning, starting off as Roman's, original right-hand man, and that Hell in a Cell match that they had, is an all-time great one, especially when it comes to the storytelling. The storytelling is what, is what made that match. Roman, crying to the point where Public Enemies made a meme using Bryson Tillman's music in the background, stuff like that. And how, Jimmy was holding Jay's hand, and eventually, Roman choked out Jimmy as well. What I mean? And just, just Jimmy, begging Jay to throw in the towel and, to give up and stuff like that. And the thing about it is that, like I say, even though Jay was the foundation, was a building block to that. At the end of the day, Roman was still the centerpiece. He was still the son that storyline and the company revolved around. Roman has, like I said, certain aura, a certain, recognition about him that Jay cannot duplicate. That Jay cannot be on his level. When's the last time that you saw Roman get out of breath while running the ropes? When was the last time you seen Roman get winded like that? I'm just saying, when was the last, it's just like, yeah, Roman had his trials and tribulations as the big dog, because Vince, forced a character on him that did not fit. That's the only reason why. But none of the higher ups, Vince included, none of them came out of their mouths on a documentary on a Netflix series, or behind the scenes special, and said, yeah, said, Roman is not ready. He's greener than grass, all type of stuff. Nobody ever said that about him. On that WWE Unreal Netflix special, Triple H said out of his mouth, he was like, look, like he straight up said it in that boardroom, in that meeting. He was like, you know what, it's just like, we know that Jay's really not that ready. Basically admit it. But we're still going to give him this push. Jay winning that title was ultimately about moving merch and creating a WrestleMania moment. It was more so about about the marketability thing. Because Gunther wasn't going to be moving no merch, especially when it comes to WrestleMania season. He wasn't going to be doing that. So that that was just just a cash grab, and ultimately for Jay. But after the entrance, as soon as that bell rings, yeah, it's like it's almost like it's like he's drowning at that point. So, and he's made it to the the thing is, he's made it to the point where he's mainly known for his entrance in a catchphrase. Because we saw the match that he had with Jimmy at WrestleMania 40. Come on now. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't want to do this to Jay. I don't want to sound like a hater. I don't want to embarrass the dude. But let's be real. Let's look at, the material that you give us. The prospects ain't prospect. It's hard for me to take 2K seriously when you keep giving him a 90, as I've said over and over again, over the likes of Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, or Macho Man Randy Savage. Jay's, it's just like, it's hard to see that in him. It's hard to see that for him. And it's one of those things where it was just like, just constantly it's like running out of names. And, he's one of the guys, that just pretty much have to throw up there. It is what it is. It's just like, I think there's, some Uso fatigue for some people. But it's just like not a lot of substance, and to the point where even when I saw the way CM Punk came out, you could tell, that it looked like Punk himself was kind of going through the motions with this a little bit. And the thing is, Jay claimed not to care about what anybody thought, and that's what brought out CM Punk. To confront Jay, to confront his opponent for the vacated Raw Heavyweight Championship. Punk said he watched Jay throw his own brother over the top rope last week They asked him how far he was willing to go in their match, you know, and Punk said, you know, Punk said he needed to be World Heavyweight Champion like he needed air in his lungs. You know, talked about how, you know, winning the title from Gunther wasn't long enough. You know, that wasn't enough for him. You know, reign certainly not long enough. Because Seth came in and it pulled the red carpet right off from under him. You know, pretty much. And so it's just like there's no real recognized issue between them. But Punk had to, you know, pull even more out of Jey. You know, but it's just like someone who has become so much of a caricature. It's hard to really take him more seriously in moments like this. You know, even though initially, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, he really much bounced off of Roman. But when Roman's not there, how much of an interest do you really have left? You know, and so Jey Uso, you know, of course, responded. He said, "Screw you, Punk." You know, and of course, I've seen, of course, said that right before saying yeet and making his exit to close out the segment. But even with this, it showed, you know, Jey, show how much, you know, how dependent, you know, Jey is when it comes to his entrance. You know, as he keeps running it back, now it's to the point where you have become a caricature, you know, of yourself. You know, now of course, you know, it's cool when it comes to, you know, selling merchandise and having different color schemes. You know, the way that John Cena, you know, always had different, you know, always had a different color schemes for different, you know, like I say, different cities and stuff like that, whatever. Like I say, when it came to Cena, it worked, but Jey is not Cena. You know, no matter how much they try to, you know, force feed that, he's just not that guy. The next up, we have the number one contenders match: Penta versus Rusev, and the winner of this match, well, they fought to a double DQ. You know, and of course, we have Nikki Bella versus Roxanne Perez. The winner of this match, Roxanne Perez. And so, of course, Roxanne wore down her Hall of Fame opponent, you know, mainly targeting the head and neck in an attempt to exploit a previous injury from Nikki. And so you see that Nikki's, you know, definitely going by leaps and bounds, you know, proving to herself and everybody else that, you know, that she can go, you know, that she belongs and that she's not, you know, some punchline for, you know, for John Cena, you know, for being John Cena's ex-girlfriend. You know, if anything, you know, Nikki's shown more effort than, you know, than what we saw out of AJ Lee. AJ was just, you know, pretty much like, you know, like, kind of like, you know, almost like In and Out, like, you know, like the In and Out burger. That's very much, you know, what AJ's been showing lately. Like, you know, there's ever since WrestlePalooza, we have yet to see her back. Like, that was just a one-off. Like, come on now. You know, meanwhile, that's another story. You know, Maxine getting title shot against Becky. Like, come on now, just whatever. But yeah, you know, of course, you know, like I said, despite interference from Raquel, you know, of course, you know, Nikki was in a position to win late, but you know, of course, Roxanne sent her neck first into the turnbuckle, deliver pop rocks for the pinfall for the victory. After the match, Stephanie Raquel made the save, preventing a 2-on-1 beatdown of Nikki Bella. We see, of course, we see Stephanie face to face with Raquel, and Raquel looks like an Amazon giant, you know, compared to the rest of them. You know, and maybe it's a lack of consistent in-ring performances. But, you know, but Nikki, you know, definitely looks, you know, a step or two slower in the ring again, you know, against today's talent. You know, but the thing is, especially since you've been out for so long, and with the way that women's wrestling has advanced and grown by leaps and bounds, to the point where it has passed you by, much like how it's passed AJ by. Um, you know, but yeah, like I said, of course, backstage we saw Bailey Hyper Valkyria for the match against Charlotte and Alexa in the main event. Um, of course, we also saw LA Knight versus Braun Breaker, and the winner of this match, the right guy won, Braun Breaker. You know what I mean? Obviously, but of course, backstage we also saw General Manager Adam Pearce informed Dominic Mysterio that he would defend the Intercontinental Championship against Rusev and Penta at Saturday night's main event. Since that match ended in a double DQ. And we have Sheamus versus JD McBobblehead, and the winner of this match, JD McBobblehead. Also, we we had a women's tag team championship match. As far as when it comes to Alexa and Charlotte Flair, as they defeated Bayley and Lyra Valkyria in the main event to retain the tag titles. And after the match, the Kabuki Warriors attacked the champion and challengers, leaving them lying there to introduce a feud. And speaking of the Kabuki Warriors, I want to give a special shout out and appreciation to Asuka, because I like how WWE showed the Asuka video package, tribute highlights and everything, as a way to clap back at Goldberg's comments, that have been circulating online and really making the rounds, to the point where Asuka herself had to address them, to the point where Asuka had to make, what almost looked like she had to write an essay to clap back at Goldberg. The fact that even got her attention like that, speaks volumes. And it speaks to to Goldberg's entitlement. It just puts him in an even worse light. And this was Triple H's proverbial middle finger, if you will, to Goldberg, and his way to say that Asuka is more than just a girl. And so, I'm not going to be for you long, but Asuka had to write what felt like almost a paragraph, pretty much. And the internet has been defending Asuka, myself included, obviously, as you can see. I grew up on Goldberg. He was cool for the time, but I was, more of like a Stone Cold Rock, type of guy, Undertaker type of guy. And so that's his biggest claim to fame for, some 187 win streak, which is, hindsight was actually more falsified than anything else. The matches were less than mid, it just like, 1 or 2 minutes at best or whatever, until he gets into the ring with someone who's, more polished than him, and he gets exposed, like Regal, Brett, something like that. It's just, pretty much like if Warrior was bald without the face paint, he'd be Goldberg, because of how limited Goldberg was in the ring. He was an attraction, don't get me wrong, but outside that, there ain't that much to really hang your hat off of when it comes to him. So, Asuka, made a comment, like I said, she clapped back. This had to be way more than 240 characters or whatever. With this response, but it clearly got under her skin. So Asuka says Goldberg's comments about me are all over the news right now, but honestly, I'm not bothered by it at all. What he said came from his own perspective, and that's fine. So there's really no need to make such a big deal. There's really no need to make such a big deal out of it. Listen to my philosophy. It's not about what I accomplish. It's about what I try to create. Philosophy and vision. That's where the real value is. I don't find meaning in anything without beauty. I've achieved every record, every title, but those are just milestones. What really matters is opening a new era, creating the moment that separates before Asuka and after Asuka, having the power to change an era. That's where true value and beauty exists. I don't chase records or championships. They're the ones that come to me. There's not enough art in this world. Sign Asuka. Clown emoji too. That clown emoji may have been her way of going over a clown. I wouldn't put it past her. She's amazing online when it comes to trolling. But yeah, this was Asuka's statement on Twitter. And the quote that got me, that I hung my hat on, a lot of people hung their hat on, was where Asuka says, I don't chase records or championships. They're the ones that come to me. There's not enough art in this world. So that was a very civilized clapback. And otherwise, childish tantrum from a dude that is pushing 60, having a tantrum like a 13-year-old. Having a tantrum, like a 12-year-old or something. And Asuka was the definition of when they go low, we go high. Asuka applied that Michelle Obama principle. When they go low, we go high. And Asuka went straight to the sky. I know there's a message, that was preached on one Sunday. Pastor talked about don't sweat the player haters, and that was that was carried out in real form. Asuka's not sweating Goldberg. She gives like I said, a civilized clapback and keeps it moving. You know what I mean? And like I said, a very polite way of putting him in his place. As she should. And I like how in the highlight video, like I see the video package, like I said, pretty much, like I said, it's hilarious. Goldberg became a meme out of this in the worst way possible. To see this dude crashing out over a female wrestler, that speaks to his immaturity. So of course, wow. So Oscar's replied to Goldberg's comment of some girl beating his undefeated streak. It says, this some girl is and will always be 10 times better wrestler than you'll ever be. You hold part-time. I was like, oh shoot, and of course, like the thing is, I saw another meme where it showed the accomplishments, back to back, like side by side, if you will. Asuka's undefeated streak, 914 days. Goldberg's undefeated streak, 461 days. Asuka, 5-time women's champion, WWE champion. Goldberg, 4-time champion. Asuka, 4-time tag champion, and Goldberg, 1-time tag champion. So, and matter of fact, that those even, those even, like an old tweet that Asuka put out, and of course, to even be mentioned with Goldberg, whatever, and then the Scott Hall back in the day, RIP, do some shades, said that she had far more talent than Goldberg ever did, something like that. And so I was like, oh man, I was like, wow, okay. And of course, I participated in the Asuka, tribute, because what we're not gonna do is play in her face, because all she does is like I said, all Asuka does is mind her business, show why she's one of the all-time greats. She innovates, she influences. Oh yeah, here it is. And this had to be back in like 2017, where Asuka originally said, this is back when she was in NXT. Where Asuka says, "I respect Goldberg so much. He's amazing. I'm honored to be the undefeated champion with the longest streak in WWE history. Hashtag WWE, hashtag NXT." And Scott Hall replied, he said, this was like I said, this NXT Asuka. And so Scott Hall, replied and says, "You're much more talented than Goldberg." So even back then, even he knew, game recognizes game. And so the fact that Goldberg got bent out of shape, over something that happened so long ago, a while back, as far as Asuka having that streak that she did, so like I said, Goldberg's original comment was like, "That happened after I got there. Girl beat my streak." I can't even remember. Again, it messed up her name. But I was like, yeah, this gives all xenophobia. So, but anyway, somebody says, "Who's the better wrestler, Asuka or Goldberg?" Are you serious? Asuka, hands down. Like I said, plenty of memes where somebody had, shows a picture of a kid crying, complaining, saying there's Goldberg after that Asuka video package. Man, Goldberg was crashing all the way out over that video package. Like the fact that, Asuka, I mean, she's a wrestling machine. She is a human, buzzsaw, if you will. And as a matter of fact, I even made a post about it as well. And so here are Asuka's accolades. She's a 4-time WWE Women's Champion. Of course, she was a 1-time NXT Women's Champion, so she was a 5-time champion overall. So she's a 4-time Women's Tag Champion. Of course, she's the second Women's Grand Slam champion. She's a 2020 Money in the Bank winner. She's the longest reigning NXT Women's Champion of all time. 522 days, 914 days undefeated. Of course, she's the winner of the mixed match challenge. She was the 2023 Elimination Chamber winner. She's the 2017 Women's Soul Survivor Series. She's the inaugural Women's Royal Rumble winner, and she was ranked number 1 of 50 female wrestlers in 2017 by PWI. That right there is Asuka's resume. When I say that outside of the horsewomen, Asuka has been the most dominant, the best female wrestler from that era. Like when it comes to, when that women's revolution, thing originally started, outside the horsewoman, Asuka was the biggest star, on that brand when it comes to NXT going to the main roster. You know what I mean? Like I say, of course, the horsewomen, they were forefront. But Asuka, if anything, she was, if anything, she was right there with them. So when you look at the post China and Trish era and all that type of stuff, we look past that. The biggest names all time, outside of them, like I said, the horsewomen, Asuka, and Bianca, I'll say right after that. But yeah, I've said this for a while. Asuka, has been the biggest star for women's wrestling who was not a horsewoman, who was not named Charlotte, Sasha, Becky, or Bayley. Asuka in NXT is terrifying. Asuka in Japan, terrifying. Asuka just period. WWE, whatever. I mean, I would have had no problem putting Asuka up against Tribal Chief Roman. It would have been believable. Asuka was a world beater, especially when she was undefeated. I would put undefeated Asuka, like I said, Asuka against Tribal Chief Roman, and I would have been convinced that she would have beat him. I would have put Asuka, up against Streak Undertaker. I would put Asuka up against Taker Streak, and I would have you know, I would have believed it. You know what I mean? Like, that's how dangerous, she was. And, and it's proven that she could still be. You know what I mean? So, Asuka was a pioneer. Now, of course, initially before that, we've had the likes of Leilani Kai and Bo Nakano and stuff like that. But Asuka took that to a whole nother level. When it came to women's, especially Joshi, women's wrestling, stuff like that, Asuka took that thing to a whole nother stratosphere like I'd never ever seen before. And I know WWE ranked her like 5th on their top 50, women's greatest women's wrestlers list and stuff. And she's got a very convincing case too, by the way. I mean, Asuka is generational. She is one of one. You know what I mean? Like we say, EO, is that for right now? In terms of pound for pound, being the best women's wrestler on the planet, she definitely has a case. But when it comes to GOAT status, Asuka is still the bar. She's still the measuring stick that the EO has to be measured with. She's still the standard that the EO has to be measured by. So, yeah. So when it comes to that, I'm not gonna let nobody play in my face when it comes to Asuka. I ain't let nobody play in my face about that at all. So we're not gonna go there. Asuka is ironclad, top 10, goated, all that. When it, like I said, as far as that, she has a resume that very few would ever match. So yeah, you know what I mean. So this is, Empress Appreciation. Let's call it what it is. But yeah, zero Asuka slander around here, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it's as far as that. Now it's time to go into, of course, I also have to mention NXT also. Speaking of NXT, I will say I am also a proponent of, hashtag, hashtag a push/legend. She deserves way more than what they're giving her. I feel like, people are playing in the face as far as that's concerned, especially when it comes to, as that women's division, like, come on now. And it's pretty much the fallout from Halloween Havoc. And you know what? Matter of fact, I'm going to get the results for Halloween Havoc. So I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to labor you any longer. Jeez, results. I'm going to go off on a rampage like that, but this is what it is. So, results for Halloween Havoc. Javon Evans and Leon Slater versus Mr. Juan Parker. The winners of this match, Javon Evans and Leon Slater. Then we have the Day of the Dead match, North American Championship, Ethan Page versus Hio Del Dr. Wagner Jr. And the winner of this match, and still the North American champion, All Ego Ethan Page. The Women's North American Championship, Zarya defending for Sol Ruka versus Blake Monroe. And the winner of this match and the new Women's North American champion, none other than Blake Monroe. That investment has been paying off, since she's joined WWE. So, hey, look, cash in on that momentum. With a new talent acquisition. Then we have an NXT Women's Championship match, JC Jane versus Tatum Paxley. Tatum Paxley is the winner and your new NXT Women's Champion. Well deserved. About time. Then we have the Broken Rules match for the NXT Tag Team Championships. The Broken Hardys versus Dark State. Yeah, and the winners of this match and new NXT Tag Team Champions, Dark State, Lennox and Griffin. Then we have the NXT Championship Ricky Saints versus Trick Williams, and the winner of this match, and still your NXT champion, Absolute Ricky Saints. So I would say that very well executed Halloween Havoc, and so this past Tuesday was the fallout of that. And when I say the fallout was heavy, it was definitely heavy. And so, like I said, thank you very much for those that haven't been watching online. And so I'm going to go ahead and just run off and see that the Trick Williams wants a rematch with Ricky Saints, to the point where Trick, star of the show, hijacking production. All for the sake of looking for Ricky, and of course they ended up having a brawl. So that's what it is. And we have Jasper Troy versus Axiom, and the winner of this match is Jasper Troy. And then we have, like I said, Tam Paxton is your new champion. The dawning of a new day, if you will. I'm glad to see that. Toxic Attraction, Fatal Influence, excuse me. The team of Toxic Attraction, catches an L. And Toronto's look like they're catching it. LA's look like they're catching L right now. I ain't with that. Not cool. And then next up, we have Kendall Gray versus Lash Legend. This is where things are really, just getting to a boiling point right now. Kendall Gray, still your, of course, SummerSlam, the winner of this match, of course, Kendall Gray. The match had a few missteps here and there, but they, made it like, definitely a hard-fought contest, if you will. Kendall's a great, underdog character, but I don't like that she's being an underdog at Lash's expense. And we have Miles Bourne versus Tavion Heights, and the winner of this match, Miles Bourne. It's Tam Paxton versus Lola Vice, ends in no contest. Finally, we have Kalani Jordan versus Jordan Grace, and the winner of this match is Kalani Jordan. Of course, she's reigning TNA Knockouts champion, Kalani Jordan. Melo don't miss, and neither does his girl. So like I say, as far as that, and then last but not least, I'm going to give my predictions for Saturday night's main event. First, 2025. So, on the card. So, yes. So, all right. So far on the card, we have 4 matches: CM Punk versus Jey Uso for the vacated World Heavyweight Championship, Cody Rhodes versus Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship, Tiffany Stratton versus Jade Cargill for the WWE Women's Championship, and a triple threat match for the IC title: Dominic Mysterio versus Penta versus Rusev. So for the vacant World Heavyweight title, and of course, Saturday night's main event is going to be in Salt Lake City, Utah, whatever. So for the vacant World Heavyweight Championship, I have CM Punk winning, especially since Seth Rollins not around no more. Why not? Then for the WWE Championship, Cody retains. No reason for him to drop it right now. Drop the title right now. Now, when it comes to the WWE Women's Championship, I want to see this heel turn pay off. So I have Jade putting an end to Tippy time. And finally, when it comes to the triple threat Intercontinental Championship match, I have Dirty Dom. Like I said, Dirty Dom retaining the title, if not him down for Penta. So those are my predictions. And now it is time for the birthdays. So for October 28th, sports journalist, legendary sports journalist Jane Kennedy turns 74. October 29th, Gabrielle Union turns 53. Tracy Ellis Ross also turns 53 today. Melba Moore, of course, legendary singer Melba Moore turns 80. October 30th, WWE Hall of Famer and legend Edge turns 52. On this same day, of course, a supermodel Ashley Graham turns 38. Nia Long turns 55. And of course, the late great gospel legend Daryl Coleywood turns 70. October 31st, late great comedy legend John Candywood turns 75. And on November 1st, of course, Bobby the Brain will turn 81. And that's it for your birthdays. And before I go, I would like to give a word of wisdom. When God chooses you, He appoints you and answers as well. And the thing is, every door that's open for you is because of God. God. The thing is, God chose you because He wanted to take something that nobody thought could become anything and do something spectacular. And God is giving you gifts to change other people's lives. So that is my word of wisdom. And always remember that you are victorious because greater is He that's in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. Please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you download podcasts. And of course, I'm also on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@Von Virginia. And of course, thank you very much for listening and watching. And may this day be the very best day of your life.